My husband and I just got married, and we moved into our first home together. Looking back, like the one major highlight of my wedding day would be just finally seeing Josiah just like standing there waiting for me. It's like I breathed for the first time that day when I saw him standing there. I remember my first house as a kid. It was a normal 3-bedroom house. As a kid, you just think everything is going to be constant, and that's just how life is. You have mom and dad, a house, and that's just what life is. When I first noticed when something was wrong, honestly, it would have to be the day that my dad, he sat me down on the counter and told me that they were getting a divorce, that they no longer loved each other. I remember he wasn't around anymore after that night. My mom wasn't sure how to make it on her own, so she sent me to live with my family in Mexico until she could figure something out. We drove to the airport and my mom was just sobbing. I arrived in Mexico and I stayed with my aunt and uncle who had 2 girls of their own. A couple months turned into a year. I remember my mom calling me daily. She would call me, and I think that's when I started to realize that something had changed, and the life I knew before coming to Mexico might not ever be the same. My mom comes to get me, and we fly back. My mom opened the door, and it was a little studio apartment. It was different. That's not what I had left, and that's not what I was used to, but at least I was with my mom. When I was a little bit older, my mom told me that we could no longer afford our studio apartment and that we had to move out. We moved all of that stuff into the storage unit, and I just remember thinking our whole lives fit in this little tiny cube of a place. My aunt and uncle were gonna take us in. We ended up moving into their living room on a blow-up mattress. We lived in my aunt and uncle's house for a little over 9 months, I'd say, and they started pushing us out. My mom just didn't know where to go. I noticed a change in my mom. I started to notice a lot of sadness in her eyes. As the years went by, she started losing herself, just trying to keep us afloat. And that's when I realized maybe we were in trouble. In that season, my mom sent me to Mexico again for the summer. I think when she realized that she couldn't do it on her own, all these little breadcrumbs led my mom to Willow Creek, which led her to Fellowship Housing. And my mom called me one day and she said, I found an apartment. It's a 2-bedroom, and I'm excited for you to see our new house. So when I was first introduced to Fellowship Housing, when I was walking into the front door of a very spacious 2-bedroom apartment, I was excited to have my own room back. I knew that things were changing. They were changing for the better, and obviously we didn't have a lot of money to do things the way the program runs. Like, she couldn't spend outside of her budget, but Fellowship gave us so much. I mean, they didn't just provide a home. They provided my mom with the support that she needed, and through providing that emotional support, that financial support, I just saw that strength in my mom just come back. Fellowship didn't make an impact for those 2 years. It changed my whole life. It was through that support of the women that were working, through the family advocate that would not only make time with my mom, but she would see me. They really taught me to have a different perspective. After those 2 years in Fellowship, we moved out and we moved into a 3-bedroom house that my mom was able to buy. A 3-bedroom house, like, that's where we started. That's where like my story began. Like my story began in a 3-bedroom house. And it was like, Mom, like you did it. This was our home. It was our home. And we didn't have to go anywhere. Because of my mom, I now have this incredible life. I am happily married and I now work at Fellowship Housing. I am so grateful for what she did. I'm grateful for what we had to go through, really. Like, it's an honor being able to walk with them as they move forward in our program. I am so proud that I get to walk into Fellowship Housing every day and help these moms rewrite their stories, just as Fellowship Housing helped to rewrite our story.